When we listen to the music of Dmitri Shostakovich, one may get a feeling of irony, that on the surface, the music may seem to be bright, energetic, even celebratory in function. But below the surface, there is a sense of perhaps something troubled or parodied, comes across as a sort of hollowness, and that suggests that not all is well as it seems. The 15-string quartets of Dmitri Shostakovich are often viewed through a sort of musical autobiography, a reflection of the composer's innermost thoughts at difficult times. Having lived under the rule of Stalin and the communist regime, there were many difficult times for Shostakovich. At this time in history, immediately pre-World War II and post-World War II, Soviet artists lived under a fairly constant threat. They never quite knew if their works would be considered inappropriate, and if so, what the consequences of that may be. When under threat, Shostakovich tended to turn to the genre of the string quartet, stepping away from the more public statements of the symphonies. In 1949, he composed the fourth string quartet. This was just 1 year after he and several other leading Soviet composers like Prokofiev and Khachaturian had come under a crushing public attack by the Communist Party, specifically by Stalin's cultural representative, Andrei Zhdanov. Zhdanov had accused these composers of numerous things: of composing pathologically discordant works, of unhealthy individualism, and of decadent formalism. According to the party, what the Russian people really wanted were rousing choruses, songs that would enliven their spirits, that would communicate the greatness of their Russian country. Shostakovich had delicately tried to explain to the authorities that artists needed to maintain their creative freedom. However, the consequences of not following the party's demands, as Shostakovich had previously been told, this could end very badly for you. Targeting Shostakovich was obvious. He was the leading Soviet composer of the time, and attacking him would have sent a very clear message to the entire artistic community. He was dismissed from his teaching posts, removed as leader of the Composers' Union, but most devastatingly for Shostakovich, a large number of his works were banned from performance, his recordings recalled and destroyed. Physically, mentally, financially, this would have been an extraordinarily difficult time. So it is under these circumstances that Shostakovich's fourth string quartet was composed. In the quartet, like the first violin concerto and the song cycle from 1948, Shostakovich had drawn inspiration from Jewish traditions, from Jewish music and poetry. However, 1949 was not a good time to be seen to be sympathising with Jewish traditions. Shostakovich couldn't have known it at the time he started composing these works, but Stalin was in the midst of planning an aggressive anti-Semitic campaign, leading to the widespread purging of the Russian Jews. So even though the quartet was finished in 1949, Shostakovich and some of his very close friends had deemed it unsafe to release. It wasn't until 1953, when Stalin had died, that the work was finally able to receive its public premiere. This Jewish influence is most obvious in the final movement of the quartet, where Shostakovich uses a Jewish scale and Jewish dance-inspired rhythms. There is a suggestion of klezmer. It's a highly expressive form of Jewish music, often heard in Jewish weddings. It features an umpa accompaniment and these sighing ideas. Shostakovich described Jewish music as appearing happy while it was tragic. It's almost always laughter through tears. This quality of Jewish folk music is close to my ideas of what music should be. There should always be two layers in music. It's this idea of dual layers of meaning, one seemingly positive, the other despairing, that gives Shostakovich's music that sense of irony that I referred to earlier. This also neatly seems to summarise Shostakovich's own life. To survive, he had to present his own works in camouflage, and himself through a facade of obedient cultural servant. As well as the Jewish inflections that are present throughout this entire fourth quartet, Shostakovich also offers veiled, brief references to other of his works. There are also some ideas that seem to merge out of nowhere. One of these ideas is worth pointing out. It is a hymn-like motive that occurs for the first time at the end of the first movement. Much of the first movement seems to be bright and optimistic, as if it was composed to appease the authorities. But when this hymn motive appears, it feels like it could be a symbolic gesture. It presents the quartet unified in rhythm. It's an eloquent voice speaking about something in which it truly believes. In the way it's presented, it could almost be an expression for longing for peace. It's an idea that occurs in various guises throughout this quartet, in later movements, but also in some of Shostakovich's later string quartets, like the 13th.